This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, the January jobs report is out and it is great news for America. The report exceeded expectations with more than 130,000 jobs being added, showing that private hiring is surging and government jobs are shrinking. Also, later in the program, Mike Tyson is getting behind the Maha movement, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refuses to walk away despite mounting calls for him to go. But first, the media has once again been exposed for its TDS, and this one is so hilarious. It's so bad, I should say, that it's hilarious. This is what was posted on Axios social media. Crime plunges in major cities despite Trump's crackdown rhetoric, which is one way of saying that crime is down under Donald Trump's leadership, from securing the border, deporting some of the worst criminals. Just maybe that is a factor in all of this. Axios has deleted that post, posting a different version of the tweet without Donald Trump's name in it. And they've kept this headline the same: violent crime plummets across major US cities. This is just why people don't trust the mainstream media anymore. And it's not just Axios. The Washington Post today posted, and I quote, "Breaking news that the Trump administration has quietly withdrawn National Guard troops from LA, Chicago and Portland, saying that there was no public acknowledgement from the White House." Even though the president posted about this back in December, saying exactly that. I mean, this is the very first line from his post, that we are removing National Guard troops from Chicago, LA and Portland. The Washington Post has now deleted the original social media post and issued a correction saying, correction, National Guard troops withdrew from 3 cities with no public acknowledgement other than Trump's social media post weeks earlier that announced the move. An earlier post below failed to note Donald Trump's post and has been deleted. This is what happens when journalists suffer from so much Trump derangement syndrome that they care more about a fake anti-Trump story than the truth. If you watch my reporting, you know that I cover protests, political theatre and media meltdowns, and what always strikes me is how disconnected the slogans are from real life. While activists shout ideology, ordinary people face rising prices, higher taxes and governments determined to make everything harder. We're told to trust the experts, trust media narratives and trust that massive spending and endless debt will make us better off. But history and common sense say otherwise. When leadership is weak and policy reckless, everyday people pay the price. That's why I believe in owning something real: physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold. Tangible assets that hold value through inflation and instability. With thousands of 5-star reviews, they deliver gold and silver to your door or store securely in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And right now, when you call and mention that I sent you, you could get up to $20,000 in free silver with your first purchase. Call 855-802-5199 or text POWER to 65532. That's 855-802-5199 or text POWER to 65532 or click the link in the video description, because when politics turns into performance and the media loses the plot, it's worth protecting something that actually holds up in the chaos and outlasts all the trends. Joining us now is Caitlin Sinclair, the host of The Caitlin Sinclair Show. Caitlin, thank you so much for your time. It's great to see you again. Let's start with what is going on with the Maha movement. There's plenty happening. I know you're going to give us the inside scoop. RFK Jr. has announced essentially the rollout of the new federal dietary guidelines and how this is going to work. Let's take a listen.
First time in our nation's history, the federal government put real food at the center of the American diet and protein in the center of the American plate. For decades, Washington lied to Americans. They told us that real food was no better than ultra-processed food. That claim defied science, it ignored common sense, and it betrayed American families. It justified hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies for ultra-processed products, fueled by nationwide health collapse that drove trillions of dollars in healthcare costs that now threaten our economy and our future and make our children the sickest generation in our nation's history and the sickest children in the world. The highest chronic disease burden of any children in the world.
Caitlin, can you talk to us about how this is going to work? Has there been any pushback to this movement to get people eating healthy food again?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Good to be back here, Gab. Of course, there's always going to be haters and people that really don't understand where America stands compared to other nations. And the numbers just don't lie. We have 40% of American teens that are already overweight. I believe it's close to 70% that are pre-diabetic. A record number of metabolic dysfunction happening in this country, autoimmune conditions, of course. You and I have talked about this, and this really is not political. We
Mm.
had Secretary Kennedy actually take the stage this morning. I was down in Washington D.C. and actually make a joke that this was the first time there was very little pushback, and they weren't used to this positive press talking about this new food pyramid and the new dietary guidelines. So this is a movement. It's sweeping across the nation, and people are waking up and taking back of their control of their health.
That is a win. Finally, some common sense perhaps that this is a good
Yeah.
thing. We've heard from boxing champion Mike Tyson. He's getting involved. Let's take a listen.
We're the most powerful country in the world, and we have the most obese, fudgy people. Something has to be done about processed food in this country.
So, Caitlin, he's really been speaking out about his own struggles with diet, also some of the health challenges within his family, getting quite personal.
Yeah, it was incredible. And I think this is so, for so many of us, personal, this entire movement and why so many are involved. It's
Mm.
because you have a loved one or yourself suffered. I have my own personal, very dark health odyssey. And I've met so many great people in this movement that share that same pain, but not only the pain gap, but it is turned into that four-letter word of hope. And they want to get involved. They want to do something about it. They want to spread awareness. And fighter and champion Mike Tyson, or the champ, I should say, is now another leader, another disruptor that is joining this administration that just continues to shoot out wins week by week. So yes, this is someone that has been through so many chapters of his life. Right? He went from champion to struggling to such an amazing comeback, and now he's in another fight for the health of America. Couldn't be more proud to be in this movement and witness that historic day today with Mike Tyson and Secretary Kennedy on stage. It was incredible, Gab.
And it's probably the most important fight. I mean, your health. Well done to the Maha movement. Some big wins there. Caitlin, I want to turn to the biggest story in the US right now. Of course, this horrifying story gripping the nation, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, a man who was detained last night for questioning. He was then released several hours later. Yesterday, we saw the FBI releasing security photos and vision, really eerie, of a potential subject in the investigation. We know authorities are working around the clock, but they've also received thousands of calls with tips, but no answers at this stage,
Yeah.
Caitlin.
No, and the story has, of course, been getting wall to wall coverage, and it's all over the place. I have been a bit wearied to talk about this because I think the family, of course, is already going through so much.
Mm.
And in an era of social media and clickbait and 24/7 news coverage, it's hard because
Yeah.
some people are unfortunately exploiting her family and their pain and their suffering. What they're already going through is so we can't even imagine. And it's hard to come to terms with what possibly could have happened to her mother and where she is. And there's so many moving parts to this story, but I will say the investigators are looking at things that your average person on social media posting is not looking at, right?
Mm.
We were looking at those images and immediately looking at the man's face, right? Did he have a mustache? What was he wearing? But these investigators that are so trained to look at little things like, is there a limp in his walk, for example? Or how did he move quickly? Is there a scar on his face, on his hand? Right? There's so many little details and nuances. So the social media, of course, everyone's trying to help, and I think that's amazing and beautiful and shows that we can all come together sometimes. But the experts are working around the clock, as you alluded to, Gab. And I am praying. I know we're all praying. But I think we should be careful not to cause more pain for this poor family that's already suffering.
Oh, absolutely. And we're all hoping for some answers, desperately hoping for some good news. The Epstein files, of course, millions of documents have been released, still millions more being hidden away, but newly released documents show that Donald Trump called the police in Palm Beach back in 2006. This is according to new documents that reveal a former Palm Beach police chief who investigated Epstein in the mid-2000s told the FBI that Trump picked up the phone and said, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." Also telling the police to go after Ghislaine Maxwell, describing her as evil. Another bubble has been burst for the Democrats, Caitlin. I mean, it absolutely shatters the Democrats and media's narrative around Trump and Epstein. And plenty of these Democrats and media outlets became so obsessed with the files, not while Joe Biden was in office, but when Donald Trump was back in power. So, look, what do you make of that development?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It's the same old narrative that's getting, again, quite old with the American people. And these are the same people that are now screaming from the rooftops to get those documents out there. Let's find out what happened. The same ones that had full control and were in power for 4 years and did nothing about it. So it's like the girl who cried wolf. It's really hard to believe these people want justice for the victims. And I would say this is more about making Donald Trump, Orange Man, the bad guy once again.
And
again,
it's failed.
horrible. Yes, it's
And it
failing
doesn't work.
time and time. The narrative is falling apart, and we will continue to see the media try to push Donald Trump as the center of this story. And that's, quite frankly, horrible for all of the victims that are suffering and really, truly deserve justice.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Just finally, before I let you go, I want to talk about voter ID. Of course, Democrat politicians are still against voter ID, but here's CNN reporting that voter ID is overwhelmingly popular. Look at this.
Take a look here. Favorite photo ID to vote. 85% of white people favor it. 82% of Latino. 76% of Black Americans favor it. So the bottom line is this. Voter ID is not controversial in this country.
There you have it. According to CNN, it's not controversial in this country, but Democrats, they don't seem to want to listen to that.
Yeah, they're calling us racist, right, for wanting voter ID in this country. And we've already all gone through it, right? How often you need to show an ID I needed to overnight my passport, Gab, from New York to Washington, D.C. today just to be able to get into the government building because I needed a real ID. I needed to show proof of citizenship, who I am. We need that to vote. We need that to buy alcohol. So there shouldn't be a problem with, of course, supporting that we need that to vote. And you know it's bad when John Fetterman on the Democratic side is actually agreeing with conservatives. He actually came out saying he supports this. So they're calling us racist. Meanwhile, CNN just told us 76% of the Hispanic and Black community, they actually support voter ID. They are looking at us saying, what do you mean? Of course I have an ID. And it's back, right? The whole thing's backwards. There's absolutely nothing racist about this. How many other nations require ID to vote? And meanwhile, we're telling those people, yes, come to America, but you don't need ID here. A lot of backwardsness. But let's listen to John Fetterman.
Absolutely. Final, at least there's one. I wish there was more. Caitlin Sinclair, host of The Caitlin Sinclair Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I have a special message here for my American viewers. It may be a new year, but for people out there buried in debt, it hardly means a fresh start. Whether you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans or medical bills, you'll want to hear about today's sponsor. PDS Debt has an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, nearly 5 stars on Trustpilot and thousands of positive real-life reviews. PDS actually works to understand your unique financial situation and craft a personalised relief plan tailored to your needs. Don't let another month of interest pile up. Take back control in 30 seconds. Get your free personalised assessment and the best option for you at pdsdebt.com/power. That's pdsdebt.com/power. Well, Keir Starmer is refusing to walk away despite facing renewed pressure over his appointment of Peter Mandelson. Joining us now is Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs, Morgan Begg. Morgan Begg, thank you so much for joining us once again. Let's talk about what is happening in the UK. Starmer rejecting calls to quit, says he claims that the real fight is against Nigel Farage's Reform UK. Let's listen to him.
I will never walk away from the mandate I was given to change this country. But the fight coming up in politics, the real fight, is not in the Labour Party. It's with the right-wing politics that challenges that. The politics of reform. The politics of divide, divide, divide. Grievance, grievance, grievance. That will tear our country apart. That is the fight that we are in. And I will be in that fight as long as I have breath in my body.
Morgan, what a chaotic week in the UK. What's your assessment of where things are at the moment? How much longer does Starmer have left?
Well, first, you have to say, you can admire the fighting spirit of a man. But while Keir Starmer might not be prepared to give up, I think the British people have well and truly given up on Keir Starmer. And now many Labor backbenchers and prominent Labor figures have given up on Keir Starmer as well. I think we've just seen recently that the Labor Party leader in Scotland has publicly called on Keir Starmer to resign. It's not a question of if, it's now a question of when. And it's not for nothing that it's worth mentioning that he is the most unpopular Prime Minister in at least since records began on polling that question. There's no capital left. He has a history of poor political judgment. The appointment of Peter Mandelson really speaks to that and speaks to it so clearly and vividly. The key question for Labor is it's actually quite a complex process to replace a Labor leader. And they've made it deliberately difficult because Labor leaders don't like to be replaced. And now if Keir Starmer is talking about not resigning, well then, they might have a very protracted leadership crisis, which will really put this government into a death spiral.
We've heard from Nigel Farage on this. Let's just take a listen.
It's not as if the PM wasn't warned. Everyone knew that the bloke was a wrong 'un. He won't be there for long. He'll be gone and replaced by somebody undoubtedly far worse.
So what do you make of those comments from Farage there that he would be replaced by somebody far worse?
Well, I think that's the key question. Farage, the clock is ticking on Keir Starmer, but there are no alternatives. Angela Rayner is sort of waiting around, ready to pounce, but she identifies as a hard left socialist. She doesn't present a positive vision for Britain's future. And his other alternative and contenders have been clipped and sort of left by the wayside. Who is coming through? Wes Streeting has been in the news as a candidate, but I feel like he's actually dealt himself out of the race. You might have seen in the last 24 hours, he's published his WhatsApp message history with Peter Mandelson, who's at the heart of this whole crisis. And it does not paint him in a flattering light. So this is the big question, and this is why the party is in such crisis, because they want Keir Starmer gone, but I don't think anyone's really clear on who comes next.
No, you're right. Also, with Keir Starmer, he's desperately trying to, as you say, fight and now save his image. He's trying to brand himself as the Prime Minister for working class Britons. He was speaking in Hertfordshire and he rejected the idea that Britain offers equal opportunity, calling it nonsense. He says that I'm in the cabinet as Prime Minister having come from a working class background, but that's the exception, not the rule. Is this kind of some PR spin from Starmer?
Oh, certainly. I think the only person who's ever gotten away with calling themselves a working class man was Jimmy Barnes. But in politics, I think the rule is if you have to say that you're working class, you are probably not working class. And because they don't really get it. You know, the Labor Party for decades have been so removed from their, you know, what was their historic working class background. And, you know, if you have respect for workers, you understand that what they appreciate is sincerity. They appreciate politicians who are genuine. You know, Nigel Farage doesn't talk about being authenticity. Nigel Farage doesn't talk about being from the working class. Donald Trump certainly doesn't talk about being a working class man. But what they offer is attention, and they talk about the policies that workers actually care about. Exactly. And so the question, and this is where Keir Starmer really falls apart, is his government has not dealt with those issues. You know, the working class communities and towns have been economically hollowed out. The rising crime rates have made it unsafe to raise a family. And the families and the parents who are getting knocks on the door at 3 a.m. by police because they've posted a social media comment that the government disagrees with, well, they probably don't have much love for Keir Starmer either. You know, so before you start talking about being working class, actually answer the question, what are you doing for them?
Mm-hmm. Great question, 100%. Couldn't agree more with that authenticity, and that's what we're seeing with Donald Trump, it's what we see with Nigel Farage. Before we move on from the UK, just quickly, London Mayor Sadiq Khan says that his ultimate goal is to reverse Brexit and rejoin the European Union. Can I get your thoughts on this?
It's the height of absurdity. And it just goes to the heart of this division, the problem in the political class in Britain, where you have, you know, Lord Mayors and parts of the major political parties and entire political parties, such as the Liberal Democrats or the Scottish National Party, who are still committed to this idea of the European project. We're coming up on 10 years since the Brexit referendum. At every stage, elites and the political class have thrown up roadblocks to make Brexit more difficult to actually achieve. And the British people, they've just had enough. You know, they want their voice to be respected. They want the agenda for the British people to be put forward by their politicians. And this is really, you know, why Nigel Farage and Reform are set to take government at the next election, because they're presenting a vision that is actually respecting what the community and the British people want.
Now, US President Donald Trump has hosted Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for talks on Iran. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that there was nothing definitive reached other than, I insisted that negotiations with Iran will continue. We'll continue to see whether or not a deal can be done. If it can, I let the Prime Minister know that will be preference. If it cannot, we will just have to wait and see what the outcome will be. Of course, last time Iran decided that they were better off not making a deal, and they were hit with midnight hammer. That did not work out well for them. Hopefully this time they will be more reasonable and responsible. Look, these talks have been dragging on for some time now. Of course, we also know that the US president has been overseeing this military build-up in the Middle East. Morgan, what do you make of the outcome, or not so much of an outcome, from those talks today, and how this is going to play out?
It's so hard to see how this plays out. And one of the big problems is a country like Iran, they're very difficult to deal with. You can't really deal with them in good faith a lot of the time. So how you actually get to an agreement that both sides will respect and is actually beneficial for global security, it's really hard to see how you get to that point. And I feel like this is there's a longer story here about this sort of 4-decade Iranian nightmare that the West has been dealing with ever since Jimmy Carter ushered in the Iranian Revolution. And we've been dealing with a radical sort of Stone Age regime in Iran that doesn't really respect the international order. It doesn't respect the West. It really wants to do things their own way. But they're a very belligerent and hostile entity. So, I want to hear more about what is the actual end game? What are we actually trying to get to? What is the goal when we're dealing with Iran? Is the restoring the Shah a part of that conversation? Is there some other plan that we're hoping to get towards? I find, the day-to-day is, it's really quite sticky and difficult, but, I'd like to see more detail or more thought about, like, what are we trying to get to with Iran? Because that's the long term, that's really what I care about.
Well, look, we are hearing more about the execution of anti-regime protesters inside Iran. The New York Post is reporting that thugs are executing anti-regime protesters, even murdering wounded demonstrators lying inside hospital beds. They're also seeing, of course, more horrifying footage that's being shared from the brutal crackdown earlier this year. And, of course, many inside Iran, many people left in the aftermath of this government crackdown are still kind of waiting for America to get involved, Morgan.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it really does speak to the desperation of the Iranian regime, a regime which is stable and confident about its place. They don't go through hospitals and shoot protesters lying on beds. It's clearly, this is like a wounded dog up against the wall lashing out. And the question is, yeah, exactly. What is the appropriate time for the US or the West to step in? And I bring it back to what I said before, which is, okay, then when we make that decision about when we step in, what happens next? What's the goal for stepping in? And that's, I think that should be the first question we actually ask when we're dealing with situations like this. I haven't heard much about it, and I really hope that there are some smart people in Washington talking about it.
I hope so too. Morgan Begg, Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Look, every country has its healthcare problems, but America's Medicare system is on another level. Millions of seniors end up on the wrong plan every year. They either overpay, lose access to their doctors, or both, not because they did anything wrong, but because the system is designed to confuse them. And it gets worse. A lot of Medicare advisors are really just salespeople pushing whichever plan pays them the biggest commission. That's why I want to tell all of my American Power Hour viewers about Chapter. Chapter doesn't work for big insurance or the government. They're independent. In fact, they are the only advisor that compares every Medicare plan nationwide to find one that actually fits your needs. On average, that saves people about $1,100 a year. Just have a read of the testimonials. One woman, Jill, said that Chapter showed her better options that didn't even appear on the Medicare.gov website. That is how broken the system is and how valuable it really is to have someone on your side. So if you're looking for Medicare guidance, don't go it alone. Call the number below to speak with Chapter and get clear, unbiased guidance on your Medicare options. Joining us now is former New York State Senator and Democrat strategist David Carlucci. David Carlucci, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. The job report, it has exceeded expectations, more than 130,000 jobs being added. And of course, this shows that private hiring is surging, government jobs are shrinking. Pretty good news. I'd like to get your reaction.
Yeah, well, it's good to see us going in a positive direction. All of last year, we were underwater with only about 180,000 jobs created for the whole year. So that was about 15,000 jobs or so a month, way under expected at about 50,000 a month. So this is good news, moving in a positive direction. Although there's many economic indicators you can look at, but jobs is always an important one, and good to see that positive news.
Looking at the jobs report, some argue that we are seeing this because of the many illegals leaving the country. When you've got 500,000 people being deported and 2 million more voluntarily leaving the country, more Americans are lining up for jobs that they were doing, and companies that have to pay more. But of course, the people who have the tough job of deporting illegals are ICE officers. And yet we're seeing so many Democrats really push against ICE, some calling for ICE to be abolished, some others calling ICE or suggesting that ICE officers are Nazis. David Carlucci, can I get your thoughts around this? I mean, surely that kind of rhetoric that we are hearing from the Democrats encourages people to take to the streets when ICE officers are really doing their job.
Well, what you have going on here is not that Democrats are against ICE or rank and file ICE law enforcement members. In fact, Democrats support our law enforcement and support ICE when they're doing the job that we expect them to do. And that's to follow just proper safeguards that we have in place for almost every law enforcement agency in the United States. That means identifying yourself. That means not covering your face. That means making sure that you get a warrant when you do go into someone's house or go target a specific person. That's just due process. And that's extremely important because we are a nation of laws. We have the US Constitution, which is extremely important. And many people, including myself, feel that unfortunately ICE is given the wrong instructions and they're not following due process. And that's what's led to the very chaotic scenes and unfortunately to American citizens dead because of this lack of respect of people's rights and due process.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely tragic that 2 people have died. That being said, some of the messaging we are hearing or we have heard from people like Tim Walz suggesting that that ICE officers are Nazis. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, no, I think what we see here is some of the concerns about what has been uncovered in terms of some of the messaging that we see that's just going in these alt-right circles or networks of the internet in terms of certain
What do you
memes.
mean alt-right circles? Like these are Tim Walz's words suggesting that ICE officers
No,
are Nazis.
what we've seen is that what's been uncovered is things like the marketing in terms of using the same text that was used in Hitler's Mein Kampf and things like that. But I think what's most important here and what Democrats are really talking about when you talk about these hearings on Capitol Hill and what Democrats have been saying is, look, we want to make sure law enforcement is doing their job, but they can't do their job when they're covering a wide swath of the United States, when they're going door to door, just trying to meet quotas of deporting residents and not going after our most violent criminals. That's what was promised to the American people, that we would deport criminals.
I think that's what we're
we
seeing.
see, no, we're not seeing that.
We're not seeing
Unfortunately, a
violent
low
criminals being
percentage.
deported?
No, when we see the numbers, we
Not
actually
at all?
see that only about 15% of the people that are being deported have any type of criminal record. So that's the problem. What we see is that ICE is incentivized to just meet a quota, and that doesn't keep us safe. When people fear calling the police because of their immigration status, that gives criminals the upper hand. What we're trying to do is make sure that we protect our Constitution, we protect the residents of the United States, and we can't do that when we're going after everyone. We do have limited resources, and we have to work together, both local and federal, to go after our dangerous criminals and not just target everyone, the gardener, the housekeeper, the farm worker.
What do
That's
you
not
mean?
right.
What do you mean that this gives criminals the upper hand? But we're seeing crime really come down under this administration.
No, we don't. Those numbers have not come out yet. It's too quick to say that. But what
We're
we
not
are
seeing
seeing,
crime go down, is what you're saying?
well, there's no statistical proof of that. I would hope that happens. But what we are seeing, why I say that, is because when people feel threatened, if someone cannot come forward and call the police because they're feared that they will be deported or someone that they love will, that causes them to go underground. It causes them to go further and do things that are not appropriate and shields criminals. The people that are following the rules, for instance, we had a 5-year-old boy be detained and his father. This father was someone that actually applied for asylum status. So ICE knew where he was, and these are the people that they're going after and detaining. Instead, the people that are really trying to skirt the law and go underground are the hardened criminals and the people we need to go after. But when we're just going door to door and trying to find that low-hanging fruit, going to a day worker site or a place where there might be people that are illegal immigrants, yes, sure, we should go and go after people that are not following the law. But when we try to get every single one of the 15 million people allegedly here undocumented, and we're not targeting that, that's where the problems arise. But further of that, what's happened in Minnesota is that when people are exercising their constitutional rights, they're not able to do that. And that's the problem that we're seeing as well, exacerbating this whole situation.
Yeah, we are seeing crime absolutely go down. And under Obama, I mean, he was the deporter-in-chief, deporting millions of illegals. It seems like there's certainly a different standard or it just seems like there's a completely different standard when it comes to Donald Trump.
Well, that's right. There is a different standard. You're absolutely right, because we follow due process. And we're a nation of laws. We can't throw those laws out the window because we want to go to some arbitrary goal. That's the problem, that the ends do not justify the means in this case. And that's where I think a lot of people are conflating this issue, trying to say that Democrats are not supporting law enforcement or somehow are shielding criminals. There couldn't be anything further from the truth. In fact, what this is about making sure that we have a community that we want to live in. If we are constantly being threatened by masked federal officers that are demanding to see our birth certificate at every a step of the way, that erodes our rights, that erodes our quality of life. And that's not a country that I want to live in, and most Americans don't want to live in. And that's evident by polling that we're seeing. Quinnipiac poll just came out and showed that over 63% of Americans do not agree with the way that ICE is handling these deportations.
I want to ask you about this Democratic LaMonica McIver, who is currently facing charges related to interfering with ICE officers at a detention facility, is now facing a lot of backlash online over her line of questioning to ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons in a heated hearing earlier this week. Let's just take a listen.
Mr. Lyons, do you consider yourself a religious man?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Okay, well, how do you think Judgment Day will work for you with so much blood on your hands?
I'm not going to entertain that question.
Oh, okay, of course not. Do you think you're going to hell, Mr. Lyons?
I'm not going to entertain.
Of course not. How many government...
The gentlelady will suspend. The gentlelady will suspend.
David Colucci, can I get your reaction?
Well, I mean, everyone has their opinion and their opportunity to question. Wouldn't it be the questions that I chose if I had that time as a member of Congress? I guess that's really all I have to say about that. This is not something that's really prominent, and this is just one question that was asked of many that I think were more substantiated and more substantial towards getting to the bottom of what's going on and trying to rectify the problems that we see throughout the country because of a lack of real guidance that's given to ICE.
Okay, we're going to leave that there. I want to talk about 2028, plenty of time between now and then, of course, but talk to us about the Democrats eyeing for the nomination. What's your assessment? Who's going to be the nominee?
Good question. I wish I knew. I think it's wide open. I think what we see is there's just so much enthusiasm on the Democratic side. You just see every opportunity that voters have, they're supporting Democrats in large numbers. That means the recent elections we had last election for gubernatorial races in New Jersey, Virginia, and then you see these special elections, like a special state Senate seat in Texas that Trump won overwhelmingly, now went to a Democrat. So I think the wind is at the back of Democrats. I'm looking forward to a healthy, robust debate on the Democratic side. And I've already seen numerous candidates pop up and indicate that they'll be running. But I think we have a long way to go, and we have a lot of candidates that still have not announced that they'll be running.
I also want to ask you about Maxine Waters. There's reportedly a generational fight brewing inside the Democrat Party that Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's now 87, is facing younger primary challenger, arguing that it is time for new leadership. Mila Rahman says that the district's median age is 36 and claims that Democrats need new energy that reflects younger voters. Can I get your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, hey, great to see people stepping up and challenging the incumbents. Our congressional system does reward seniority, so there is a benefit to having just serving that longer time, meaning more resources, being able to bring back to the district, et cetera. But I'm not really concerned about this. Actually, I think it's a good thing that we see a robust fights within the Democratic Party. But I'm more concerned about these races where we can pick up and beat Republicans. This is not a district that is in that criteria. So this is really an outlier. What's more interesting are the races between Paxton and the Senator Curran in Texas, where you have this issue of millions of dollars being spent to fight a Republican primary where that money could go to other places trying to defend Republicans. But I think Texas is going to be an interesting state to watch because of the tens of millions of dollars that has to be spent defending this U.S. senator against the Texas Attorney General, one where Trump has not weighed in, and it's left people really scratching their heads on who to support, but one where they think if this more right-wing candidate wins, it could play well for Democrats in the general election. So it's really interesting to see, I think more so on the Republican side, where they are having this interfighting in districts and in Senate races that really could benefit Democrats in the long run.
Okay, former New York State Senator and Democrat strategist David Carlucci, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.